This is Lisa Tucker, host of The Book Cover, which showcases local literary personalities. So listen to The Book Cover on the Borderline. And remember, don't judge a book by its cover. Hi, you're listening to The Book Cover on the Borderline. I'm Lisa Tucker, and today I have author Jemi Fraser. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Now, am I pronouncing that Fraser or Fraser?
Fraser.
Fraser. Okay, yeah. Okay. See, I'm thinking of Jamie. And we already talked about the Highlander that I love. So, Jemi, I can't believe I didn't know this, but you've been writing books since 2020.
Mm-hmm. I've been publishing since 2020. Writing a little longer than that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So what's your background? How did you...
I'm a teacher, and I've loved spending time with my kids and with words and teaching them to love reading, and I'm a huge reader myself, always have been. So it just seemed natural at some point to try and write a story and see how it turned out.
And your genre is...
small town romance with some suspense.
Oh,
it's not heavy suspense, but it's small town romantic suspense.
So would they be like cozy romance, cozy mysteries?
Yes, it's a very light feeling. It's not super angsty. It's not terrifying, but there is a definite suspense element in all the stories.
Very cool. And what was your first book?
The first one that I published was Dancing with Dementia.
Oh, that was your first one, and that's a nonfiction.
That's a nonfiction memoir, yeah.
And that's quite different from the rest of your books.
It's very different. I was writing the other books originally, and then dementia slammed into our family and took over our world, so I put everything else on hold and just worried about my mom. And then the book came to be. We were just writing down snippets of what was happening with Mom so that we could tell the doctors. Mm-hmm. And eventually it was, maybe this is good enough to put into a book to help some other people with their early stages of dementia.
Wow. And it's called Dancing with Dementia, Recognizing and Coping with the Early Stages of Dementia. And I see here it's filled with love, laughter, and practical advice. Yes. So is it hard to find laughter in something as serious as dementia?
It's really difficult to find the laughter, but Mom was funny, and she's been gone for just over a year now, but she was always the star of the show, and she was always the center of attention, and we learned to laugh from her, so it was easy to write the joy parts into the story.
And would you say that her having dementia sort of propelled you into publishing?
Yes, absolutely.
Because you probably wouldn't have done your romance if it wasn't for the first book.
Exactly.
Wow.
I really wasn't sure if I was ever going to publish. And then when I started putting the snippets together for Dancing with Dementia, I thought it would be great to help other people through those journeys. We didn't have a clue about dementia. We're a first generation Canadians. My parents emigrated from Scotland, and I thought our story might help some other people. So I put it out there and then thought maybe the other stories go out too. So
right.
They did.
Once you get them out there, that fear of having other people read your work, it sort of lessens.
It's a little easier. A
little bit more manageable.
And using a pen name makes it easier too.
So
I am Jemi when I'm writing.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, we will not call you anything but then. And so, what did your family think of Dancing with Dementia?
I made sure they were all okay with it, except for Mom. We didn't ask her; she was too far gone into the journey. However, she would have loved to be the center of the story, and she would have loved all the attention, and she would have loved helping other people. So we know we would have had her blessing, but we didn't feel it was fair to cope with her. We use a pen name or a pseudonym for her as well in the story, and I explained that in the beginning, that just for her privacy. Some of the stories are really funny, but they're a little embarrassing on her side, of course, because dementia's nasty.
It can be very graphic.
Yes.
I've heard some stories from friends who have had parents with dementia, and it's not a kind disease.
No, it's horrific.
Yeah, it is. So other than your first person experience with dementia, did you have to do lots of research?
Mostly no. I did do some, and mostly to help Mom cope. But specifically for the book, we just focused. It's a focus on our journey and how we learned to cope and how we learned to recognize the signs, and with a focus on helping others. So it's not medical advice. It's not a diagnosis officially. It's just to help anybody else.
Just one family's journey through dementia, and
Exactly.
if you've learned from it, awesome.
Yeah. And if you can
great.
get a few giggles along the way, that's good.
Aw, that's awesome. And then, so after Dancing with Dementia, which is this very serious nonfiction look at dementia, how did you transition from this serious book now to light romance, light mystery?
I needed a break for a lot of it. It's
Yeah.
really difficult to write about your family and the dementia. Sometimes I was only able to write in 15-minute snippets, and then I needed something else. So the light-hearted happily ever afters are very welcome at that point in time.
Right.
And as a teacher for so many years too, I know that everybody deserves a happy ending. So it's fun to write those.
For sure. And
Yeah.
we grow up listening to fairy tales
Yes.
and listening to stories as children. They always have the happy endings, and it's almost comforting.
It is.
Yeah. So this was probably therapy for you.
Oh,
After
absolutely.
going through, first of all, the journey of dementia, and then sort of reliving all that with writing about it,
Yes.
and then you switched gears and thought, now you're writing for you.
Yes. And writing for some happy. And again, trying to spread a little bit of happy out in the world. We don't have enough of that all the time. So happy is good.
Happy is good. Did you use the same publisher for both?
It's all me.
It's all you.
Yes.
And what do you publish under?
Just Jemi Books is my publishing imprint.
It's just
Just
Jemi.
Jemi Books.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. And now you've got so many, I'm just,
I have a few.
You have a few. So I'm just going to read some of the titles. And I see one here. It's book 10. So you've got
I have
Blue Moose Romance.
Yes, that's my first series.
Okay. And then I saw another one. It's the Small Town Heroes.
That's the second series.
And then
No-
No Phail Heroes.
Yes, and that's series number 3, and it has 2 books out now, and the third one's coming out soon.
I see that. So are the other series, are they completed? Like you won't write more?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the first series is set in Blue Moose, and I've set them in Vermont because I needed a place with similar climate because I couldn't write about another climate. I wanted something that would match, but I also needed a place with multiple highways going in and out. Northern Ontario doesn't have that. We have
One in, one out.
one in, one out. So I looked, Googled around, and Vermont has a very similar climate, and it has a few more options. So I created a town called Blue Moose along a fictional lake called Blue Moose Lake, and that was my first series.
It's a very Canadian name.
It's a very Canadian name. And
We name everything Moose, Moose Jaw.
We do.
Yeah.
The second series are also set in Vermont, but they're in a town called Phail, Phail, which is why the No Phail Heroes comes in.
Okay.
But it's just fun to have fun with the names, so it makes it. I always have some kind of humor in all the books. It doesn't slide into comedy, but it's just silliness. So there's lots of puns and silliness with the names.
And I really like that in the book because in real life, humor's everywhere.
It is, and it
And
gets you through.
It helps lighten the mood. It helps with awkward moments. So it's a real life thing
Yes.
that you're putting in your fictional books.
Yes.
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 Because it is there.
And it is just silly. Like there's lots of jokes about, welcome to Phail, where the characters aren't quite sure of the new characters coming to the town aren't too sure about the name, but it ends up being fun all the way around.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did you decide, did you go in writing these books knowing that you weren't going to do the real graphic, like Shades of Grey, sex?
Yes, I'm not comfortable with writing that way. I prefer everything on the lighter end. So
Yeah.
whether it's the suspense or the intimate scenes, everything's on the lighter end.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And we talked about how you first published in 2020. Did COVID have anything to do with you publishing in 2020?
I planned it and I set up the publishing dates. I decided that Dancing with Dementia would be March 31st, which, was the exact pretty much date of the pandemic starting, but I set it all up in December.
Okay.
And I'd chosen the date of July something for the romances to start publishing then. So it didn't cause me to do any of the writing.
Okay.
But it was a nice distraction from the pandemic too.
There are a few writers, those people that have ants in their pants.
Mm-hmm.
That there's actually a doctor in town who he couldn't perform surgeries.
Oh,
he was
yes.
right,
Yeah.
and he was sort of sedentary now, where normally he's all over the place, and
Yeah.
it was the quiet of COVID that sort of projected him into writing these books.
And then that makes sense. It was
Yeah.
it's such a, if you have any interest in it, it was such a perfect time to do all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I missed the boat. I'm gonna have to wait for the next global pandemic
Oh,
to write mine.
let's not have one of those.
All right. I agree. Let's not do that. So you had mentioned, okay, you first started publishing in 2020, but when did you start writing?
I think I started, we had exactly 2 creative writing assignments in my elementary school and in my high school combined. I had 2 and they were both in grade 6. So I didn't even think about being a writer. I just enjoyed reading. And then when my kids were little, and they're old now, when my kids were little during their naps, I thought, I'm going to write a Star Trek story. So I decided to write a Star Trek story, and I just had fun with it. And it was terribly angsty and way over the top, and I'm sure it was awful. I don't have a copy anymore. But it was so much fun that it probably took me over a year to write, because I was just doing it at different times.
Yeah.
And
you're doing it for you.
I was doing it for me, and I had an absolute blast doing it.
Right. So when you first start, what I guess, again, directed you towards the romance writing? Was there something that...
I didn't even read romance till I was in my 30s. So I really don't know. My next playing around book was a murder series. It was going to be a series about a woman who was a reporter and wanted to write backstories for the homeless people in the morgue. And she wanted to give them names and stories. And I wrote this incredibly long, incredibly angsty story about her that wouldn't ever be read by anybody else. But again, I had a lot of fun writing it, and there was a bit of a romance element in there, and then I thought, that's kind of fun. So I tried the next one, and then I finally found where my voice worked.
Yeah.
That as a teacher, I tried some young adult books too. I did some steampunk, but all of that's just for me, and it's all
Right.
hidden away in files somewhere.
So what I'm trying to get at is, how did you know? You wrote all of these other books that you thought were shite.
Exactly.
And to use a English
Yep.
Scottish word. And then you write your first book, your first romance book, and you know that it's good. How did you know?
It just felt right.
Yeah.
I do a lot of things by intuition. I'm not a planner. I'm not a plotter for the stories. I just write what feels right. And the romance was just comfortable. There wasn't any sense of it being wrong. It just felt good. And the small town romance is more specifically because it just has a softer vibe, a softer feel to the whole genre.
Yeah.
And I like that kind of feel.
Well, and they say write what you know, and you're living in a small town.
Yes.
So
It works.
have you shared your story? Like, did you share your story with family, with your kids?
No.
Because kids are
Absolutely
brutal.
not.
So you published them before you shared it with anybody.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Now online, I did find a few critique partners, and we shared each other's stories back and forth. So I had people input into the story, but not family. No, none of them are romance readers, so I wouldn't ever.
So they
share.
still haven't.
Oh no.
They have no idea. So your kids have no idea.
Oh, they know, but they wouldn't read it.
They don't read it.
No, absolutely not.
But if they did read it, they wouldn't be embarrassed because it's not too raunchy.
I would hope so, but
Because
my
really,
son still might be a little embarrassed. Yeah.
well, our goal as parents is to embarrass our children much as possible.
That's true.
So that would be a good way to do it if you wrote raunchy and then made them read it.
Yeah.
Do you so you've got 3 series out right now, and you're still writing, I guess, the third
Yes.
in the No Phail Hero.
Right.
You said the third is going to be out, but I see a list of 6.
Yes.
So you are a plotter.
Well, to a point. I read a book by an author, I think she's from London, Ontario, Zoe York, and it's called Romancing Your Brand. And she talks about thinking of the series as a whole and starting with one of the main characters and kind of growing from that and thinking in tropes. And I'm not very good at that part, but thinking about the characters really works for me. And so I ended up with a team on this one, and the first series is not connected well at all, but in this one I'm learning. And there's a team of 6 former military men who end up in this town of Phail. So I had an idea what all 6 were going to be before I even started one.
And I really like those stories where the main character of the second book is in the first
Yes.
book as a secondary
Yes.
character, because you start a rapport.
Exactly.
And you now know who his friends are and who his people are, and you start that rapport with the characters. I really like that.
And I wish I'd met you and had that conversation before I started series 1, because I didn't do that.
Well, and it's the easiest way. You know who writes like that is Nora Roberts.
Yes, and I love her stuff.
She'll take, and she, when she does her trilogies,
Yes.
for example, she's got a group of 3 friends.
Yes.
Or she's got a group of 3 sisters or 3 brothers. And so the lead character in each of the 3 books are each of the 3 people.
Yes.
And it makes sense.
Yes. And the second series, I did something similar that I learned, and Zoe's book really helped, that it's a woman who's a scientist and an inventor, and her brother's an FBI agent. So between the 2 of them, all the connections were there, and they came together in this small area outside of Phail.
Right.
And they just had the FBI characters end up creating their own training organization for other people who are doing bodyguard business and that kind of thing. So again, they had a mission around the 6 books, and it really just makes it easier in my head.
Well, it makes it easier for you to write because you have building blocks now.
Yes.
But it makes it, as a huge reader, it makes it comfortable when the reader knows, oh, this is so-and-so's friend from before, and I know a little bit about his backstory before you even open the book.
Yes.
See, that's nice. That's good.
I
really brings readers in.
That's good to hear.
Yes, it does. It does. And see, now knowing that makes me want to read the books.
There we go. That's
because
exciting.
I have not read them yet. How do you get, so you do it all yourself. How do you get the cover art?
That's my daughter.
No way.
Yes, who does not read romance, but is an avid reader herself. She just prefers psychological thrillers.
Sure.
And that kind of thing. But she's very artistic, and she has a really good eye. So she's studies the romance genre for me, and then creates them.
So the people on the front covers, are these real people that she knows?
No, these are stock photos that you buy from a stock photo site.
Right.
Yeah.
But she's done them.
Yes. And then she puts it together with the backgrounds. And
yes. Well, they look like they could be
trad pup.
Harlequin romance, like a Harlequin type.
I think so too. I think she's done a great job.
She's done an amazing
very talented.
Wow, amazing job, and what a great thing to put on your resume as a graphic artist.
Yeah, she's not, and she doesn't advertise that she does this. She just does them for me. So
how special is that?
Yeah.
So she's
great.
She does the cover art without reading the book.
Of course.
I don't know.
I give her a little bit of what the characters are about, what the story's about, and the whole series is about. So she has an idea visually where they are,
right,
and what kind of feel I'm going for. And I think she does the small town vibe really well.
I'm just looking, and there's water, there's trees, and this is what's in a small town.
Yeah.
And if not, she's got a great. The backgrounds are great.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a family. That's a labor of love. Like you're doing it with your daughter.
Yeah.
So what a wonderful thing.
Oh, she's terrific. Yeah.
Do you pay her?
No, we trade services.
So that's great. You've got your daughter helping you.
Yes.
And so she's invested. So that's something that you can work on together. It's nice to keep that in the family.
It
it's
is.
Nice to,
it's good. It's a good connection.
It is a good connection. Yeah. So you said you retired. When did you retire?
5 years ago. 6 years ago? Somewhere in there.
Okay, so you were already retired when you started writing.
I
started publishing.
Started publishing, yes. I was writing beforehand, which is the main reason I ended up with a pen name, because teaching elementary school and writing romance don't fit. And so I went with the pen name, but I didn't end up publishing until afterwards anyway. So,
would you, now as busy as writing and publishing is, Would you have been able to do all this while you were still working as a teacher?
I don't think so.
It's busy.
It's very busy. It's
Yeah.
incredibly difficult. Teaching is a very time-consuming job as it is, and the writing and the publishing. And at that point, I thought I might do my own covers, so I was learning how to make a website, learning how to do covers, learning how to publish the books on the different sites, learning the ins and outs of the business.
Yeah.
There's a lot, so I don't think I would have done
And
well.
with teaching, I come like my family are all teachers. With teaching, you come home and you're not so much physically exhausted as mentally because you give it all
yes.
to the kids.
Yes.
What grades did you teach?
I taught everything 5, 6, 7, 8. I did a lot of special ed work as well, and then we added in the dementia in there as well, and it was just overwhelmingly draining. Draining is
Well,
a
and
good
that's
word.
we talked about it a little bit earlier. How yes, you did it. It was probably therapeutic for you to relive all that. You must have had to have done that because you did do it.
Exactly.
But it doesn't mean it was easy.
It wasn't.
Just like therapy is not easy.
It's not easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
That's awesome. So after No Phail Heroes 6-book
Yes.
6-book
series.
I know you already have something else
I
because writers
do.
do. So what else? What is next
I'm
coming?
thinking, I was watching some things with regenerative farming. So I'm thinking that I'm going to have an apple series, an apple orchard series, an apple farm with a look at biodiversity and what you require to grow the apples in a healthy way while helping the soil regenerate. So I'm thinking that we'll have a little farm somewhere probably outside of Phail as well, and I'll connect it.
So it
again.
will be fiction and it will be romance.
Yes.
But you want to do this. So how did you? What did you see something? Did you learn something? How did you come across
The
that?
brain is always working,
Yes.
and I don't really know where the ideas came from. I'm really not even sure. Probably from something we saw on TV.
On the news.
Yeah. And the regenerative farming has been fairly big. I don't garden myself. My daughter's a big gardener. But it just sounded interesting. So I started doing some research into it, and it's fascinating, all the ins and outs of making the soil healthy again, taking it from what we've poured into the environment and poured into the ground itself, and then regenerating it to make it healthy again.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a fun underlying message under the story.
And I love, again, I'm an avid reader, so I can say this. I love learning something while I'm being entertained.
Yes.
Because
I agree.
Yeah, you always want, if it's something that you had no idea about, and an author sort of brings that out. I know Dan Brown does an amazing job of that. I'm always running to my computer when I'm reading something like that and saying, is this true? Is this really what happened? And then it gets the conversation in me started about regenerative
farming. Yeah.
Yeah, see, I've never heard that term before.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to look it
there
up.
you go.
Yeah. Had you ever considered going to a traditional publisher?
Originally way back, because I thought that was the only way you could get published.
Yeah.
And then I started learning more. A couple of people I knew online published on their own, and a few of them just loved it and talked about how fulfilling it was. And if you look money-wise, traditional publishers have a wider market, obviously, but you get 5 to 12% of the royalties of the income.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're indie publishing, it's 70.
Yeah.
So it's a smaller market and it's harder to reach people, but it's
getting
nice
more
to
bang.
get all that
Yeah.
back.
A local author, Judy Shellick. I'm not sure if
I've heard the name. I haven't met her.
She just she had published she just did a workshop at the library about self-publishing and she, at one point she broke it right down and she said maybe 44 cents per book.
Yeah.
When you do it the traditional way.
Yeah. Which is not a lot.
44 cents a book.
No.
It's you're not going to get rich. It is a labor of love. It's because you've got these stories inside you that need to be out.
The main point is not the money, but it's nice to get the money too.
It's nice to
and
be
with indie
acknowledged.
publishing, you get $3 to $4.50 per book, depending on what country it's in and which Which retailer you're using?
Right.
Yeah.
Are you in different countries other than Canada?
Yes.
Tell me.
I put my books on Amazon, Google Play, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. And so my coolest sale was in Qatar, that I had somebody buy several of the romances in Qatar. South Africa is fairly popular, Germany.
And these are only in English?
Yes.
Very
Yes.
cool.
So Australia and New Zealand, because there's a lot of English-speaking people there as well.
But Qatar.
But Qatar was really cool.
Right?
And it's neat that you can see that on your Kobo dashboard, for instance, that you can see where all the sales come from.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I wonder if that, I always like to look further. I wonder if that person's using your book to learn English.
I wonder.
Right?
And I wondered at the time, too. Yeah.
Would you ever publish in a different language, like maybe French or an indigenous language?
Potentially, but it's a lot of work to pay for the translations, and the return probably isn't very big. So not for me anyway, I don't think. I don't know enough about it yet, but it would be an interesting journey. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, being that you taught children, any thought about, you said you did sort of do...
Yeah, I wrote a few for myself. Again, YA steampunk was a thing that I did at the time. Yeah. And I've considered doing some mysteries for middle grade kids, potentially, because that's a lot of fun to write, too. So I might do that one day.
Yeah, and you know what? YA is basically very little, or romance, you don't describe it at all. And very little graphic description of killing, murder, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
But when you look at things like the Divergent series, that's YA.
Yes.
Or the Hunger Games.
Hunger Games.
That's YA.
They're pretty intense.
They are pretty intense. So it's a very short trip from a cozy romance mystery to YA. Very short trip. Yep. There's very little editing that has to be done too.
No, there would be, you're changing the age of the characters, obviously. Sure. But it's the same feel, I think, the same kind of vibe. Yeah. So I might end up doing that sometime. I also love science fiction and fantasy, so that might be another avenue.
Well, you tried to write a Star Trek book, for goodness
really bad
sakes.
Star Trek novel.
I love it. Fan fiction.
It's great. It's the way a lot of people, I think, get started. And,
yes.
Yeah.
And they like the way writing makes them feel.
And you don't have to worry about creating your own setting, creating your own characters, because they're already there. So it's a learning step along the way.
Yeah, that's true. So you already mentioned some of the e-ways, the electronic ways of getting your book. Are there any print books available in town that people can go and buy?
I don't think so. I've never approached anybody. I'm pretty much an introvert, so this is my first event as Jemi. Okay. And so I don't approach people. I haven't done that yet.
Well, you'll need to do that because people like to get their hands on, like, especially local, right? You want to be able to, but you do have a website that will direct people, correct? And the website is?
JemiFraser.com.
So it's JemiFraser.com.
Correct.
Okay. Yep. And they can see all the books that you've done. Yep. They can purchase all the books from there.
Yep. It just leads them all to the retailers. I don't sell them directly on my site. Okay. But there's links to all the retailers for ebooks and paperbacks.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming
on
the show. You've been a pleasure. I'm glad that this is your first time. You did great.
Well, thank you.
You did amazing.
You made it very easy.
Oh, I'm glad. So we've been talking to author Jemi Fraser from Sault Ste. Marie, of course.
Of course.
And I wanted to thank you again. Thank you. You've been listening to Lisa Tucker on the book cover, on the borderline. And remember, don't judge a book by its cover.
Hi, this is Jemi Fraser, author of Small Town Romance and nonfiction memoir called Dancing with Dementia. You can find out more about my books at my website, JemiFraser.com. And you can also check out my podcast with Lisa Tucker on the book cover, On the Borderline.